Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Good to be with you. And welcome to our Thursday edition of our Jewish Mindfulness Meditation. Everyone's invited to come on in and get settled and take your seat. We can use the next 5 minutes or so, and I will too, to see if we can reduce and let go of anything that might be distracting, anything that emotionally we're hanging on to. See if we can set that aside for the time being. Close any windows on our screens you don't need right now. Turn off your phone or device. I will demonstrate. Give yourself the gift of just transitioning into time just to be together. The gift we have each day for this. And some suggested check-in questions for you, just to take a moment to check in with how you're doing physically today, to remember you have a body and see how you're doing in that dimension of your being. How's your body doing today? Check in and see what emotions are stirred today. Anything from joy and happiness to guilt, shame, grief, gratitude, anxiety, any combination of the above or more. With the memory that there's nothing wrong with any feeling and that no feeling is final. Just noticing and taking our emotional temperature at the moment. And you may want to check in with your state of mind today. Is it settled? Is it agitated? Is it partly cloudy, mostly cloudy? Storms on the horizon or clear skies up in the mind? And it's always helpful for me to remember, I can check in on my soul today, my spirit. How am I doing? What's my spiritual condition at the moment? Am I feeling connected? Am I feeling unaware? Feeling distant, alienated? As we check in on those 4 worlds or 4 dimensions of our being, our body, our emotions, our mind, our spirit, maybe a blessing bubbles up from within to offer ourselves. And you can just complete the sentence for yourself. May I be blessed with. It might be something that's calling for some attention today, or some seeds that could be watered as we move into spring. Listened to a podcast this morning from the Hartman Institute on hope. And so my blessing for myself today is may I be blessed with hope, with tikva. And if you feel comfortable identifying a blessing for yourself or an intention for practice, and you are comfortable sharing it with the group in the chat, you're always invited to do that. And or just whisper it aloud to yourself. May I be blessed with, or my intention for practice today is to, in the minute or two before we begin, our custom is to create a Misha Berach together, a blessing for healing. So I invite you to call to mind right now anybody in your life who is in need of healing. Scan your circle. See if you can identify a person or people who are in need of healing of any kind. You can put their names in the chat as we do this collectively, praying for all the people each of us is calling to mind, holding them in our hearts and sending them our prayers, our blessings for refuah shlema, for complete and full healing from whatever ails them. And as we have been doing since October 7th, we are calling to mind our siblings held in captivity, bringing our full attention to them and to their plight, and visiting with them, as it were, lending our presence, praying that they can feel that and they can know that they are supported, loved, and prayed for, and that they be released soon, safely, back to their homes and their families, along with all who are displaced from their homes. And with that, let's begin, friends. And welcome, everyone. I'm Mark Margolius of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and welcome to a Thursday edition of our daily Jewish mindfulness meditation. As you know, we meet at this time, Monday through Fridays, 12:30 Eastern, half an hour of Jewish mindfulness meditation led by an amazing array of gifted Jewish mindfulness meditation teachers. In addition, we offer our Jewish yoga studio, which meets on Mondays at 11 a.m., 45 minutes of beautiful Torah teaching and embodied practice led by Cantor Lizzie Shamash every Monday at 11. We've been doing so for the past over 4 years now, all live streamed on our YouTube channel. All the recordings are posted there. And as I mentioned, without charge, you can drop in anytime. We can do that because you show up and create this amazing community of practice. We can do it because of your financial support. So if you're in a position to offer a gift, donation to support our work, we're grateful for that. It indicates your support for this. If you're in a position to become a monthly donor to IJS, even for a small monthly amount, that's extremely helpful for us and indicative of the support for programs like this. So thanks to anyone who is in a position to do that, or just a one-time donation. We thank you for that in any amount. If you're in a position to offer a gift of $180 or more, you can sponsor one of our daily sits. And just a couple of quick announcements for today. One is that you can still register for our Heat Bodhidut program with Rabbi David Jaffe and our Igniting Your Creative Spark series with Rebecca Schistler that started last night with her guest, Chana Raskin, which was a stupendous program. There are 3 more sessions in that series. You can sign up for one or all of them. And just a reminder, looking ahead to Passover and the Omer, we're offering, again, our awareness and action for the Omer program, Cultivating Character Through Mindfulness and Midot, with guest teachers, Rabbi Tamara Cohen, Rabbi Aaron Weininger, and Kohenet Kashir Halef Fife, and myself, live sessions throughout the Omer to move through that period together as a community of practice, cultivating a series of Midot, all linked to the respective weeks of the Omer, the 7-week period between Passover and Shavuot, which is traditionally a time for reflection and ethical and spiritual growth. So we hope you'll plan to join us for that. With that, I'm happy to turn things over to our teacher for today. Returning to lead us is Rabbi Adam Kligfeld of Temple Beth Am in Los Angeles, who is a gifted meditation teacher as well as an array of other gifts as a rabbinic leader for his congregation in LA. And mentioned at the outset, leads a meditation session every Friday morning at Temple Beth Am at 8:15 Friday morning Pacific time, which is available by Zoom for those of you who would like to join in. You're welcome to do that. And thanks Harry Goboa, who's holding our tech space today. The link for that meditation session on Fridays, which is a weekly session, and the Zoom link with the password is in the chat for those of you who might want to save it. And with that, happy to turn things over. Really happy to get a chance once again to learn with you, Adam, and to get a chance to sit with you. Thanks so much.
Yai, 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 ya, da, da. Hi, ya, da, 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 da. Ho, yai, ya, da, 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 da. Yai, ya, da, 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 da. Ay, 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 ay. The holiday of Purim falls on different parshiot throughout the cycle based on if it's a leap year or not, how many double portions we've had. And so there's a different Torah mood in different years when Purim comes around. And this year I feel caught on a level of midot, on a level of personal character and what I'm supposed to be focusing on, between something jumping out at me from the Megillah and something jumping out at me from the Parsha. And it's that latter one that I want us to focus on in our meditation. But here's the contrast. There's something about the Purim story that's inviting us to see in Esther a certain audacity of presence and purpose, to make sure that there is enough of us, even more than we thought there should be in a particular moment. Who knew? Who would know? Mordechai says to Esther, if it was for this very purpose that you were brought up to this position in the kingdom. Right? This moment needs more of you, Esther. Don't hold back. Don't be shy. Don't be restrained. The world and the society and our people need you to be as present as possible and to believe in yourself. There's an audacity to that. And in the Parsha that we're going to read the morning before we read the Megillah, we're reading the beginning of the book and the Parsha of Vayikra. And many of you know, if you ever looked at a Torah scroll, that the Aleph of the word Vayikra is one of the letters that is written smaller than all the others. Why? The traditional answer is Halachala Moshe Sinai. That's the way it was given to Moses at Sinai. We don't have a record or tradition of the scroll without that Aleph being small, but any commentator who's ever commented on any verse in the Torah has said something likely on the significance of that Aleph. And
Adam, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just like asking you to just, some people are, I hear you fine, but some people are saying it's a little bit soft. Maybe, sorry if you could just speak up a little bit or get a little closer. Thanks.
yeah, I'll try not to shout either. So many people who comment on the Aleph of small Aleph of Vayikra connect it to a notion of humility, but I want to share one Hasidic version of that commentary as the way into our meditation. Rabbi Meir Chiel of Ostrovietz in the late 19th, early 20th century, he says something interesting. There is no obligation in the Torah to be humble. There's no mitzvah. We are told that Moshe was, but we're never told that it's something that is required of us according to Jewish practice, even though we'd all like to think that that's an important way of being. And his answer why, connected to the Aleph of Vayikra, is this follows. If being humble and modest and being less than were a mitzvah, then you'd feel very, very good about doing it. And it would undermine, on some level, the true nature of anivut, right? Of recognizing that there is a place for humility in the building of character, in the building of Jewish character. What we don't want is Jews going around strutting, saying, look how much of a nothing I am, if you get the reference to the joke. So the Torah, the tradition, does not formally command it because it doesn't want you to feel like you should get credit for having done it. It's simply something that undergirds all of our ways of being in prayer, in moments of mitzvah, and in moments of interpersonal connection. It's everywhere, even if it's not a specific command. That's the opposite of Esther a little bit, right? We're supposed to put ourselves forward so that the moment has as much of us as it's needed, and we're supposed to hold back to make sure there's not too much of us in any given moment. It's that latter one that I want to use as we head into a moment of extended mindfulness. So if you haven't already, I invite you to close your eyes. And without even changing the position of your body, I invite you to claim the position. with kavanah, with intentionality. And enjoy and lean into the paradox of being very, very here wherever you are, knowing exactly where you are sitting, in what room, in what home or building, in what neighborhood, in what city or town or state. To claim your presence exactly where you are, and also to have an experience of everywhere and anywhere, as if you are floating beyond space and time, not contained in any one chair, but rather a part of everything that exists. And notice the power of that thin membrane called your eyelid that you've brought down over your eyes, not for slumber, not even for a nap, but for a different kind of wakefulness. May be the kind of being awake that you've been yearning for all day and didn't even know it. Try to hold yourself in a place of poised rest. And plot yourself on the continuum between an audacious Esther, without whose presence there would have been calamity, and the tiny Aleph, as understood by the Rabbi of Ostrovets. Where is there too much of you in the world? How do you bring your regular-sized Aleph to an appropriate diminution? Not so you can strut that you've done it, not to get mitzvah credit for it, but because sometimes a room, a conversation, a dynamic, the world needs a little less of each of us, a little less from each of us. Find and become your reduced Aleph. Yum da 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 da. Yay, hi, hi, yay, ya da da. Yay, ya da 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 da. Ho, yay, da 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 da. Yay, ya da 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 da. Yay, hi, hi, yo. Start coming to the surface. Open your eyes if you like. I'm going to share the screen. I invite you to say with me this closing meditation prayer I learned from one of my teachers that emerges from the Buddhist mindfulness tradition, and we say it 3 times together. Um, may we and all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May we all be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May we all experience true happiness that has no taint of suffering. May we live in great equanimity, free from burdening attachment to loved ones and contempt for others, but rather with compassion for all. May we and all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May we all be free of suffering and the causing of suffering. May we all experience true happiness that has no taint of suffering. And may we live in great equanimity, free from burdening attachment to loved ones and contempt for others, but rather with compassion for all. May we and all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May we all be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May we all experience true happiness that has no taint of suffering. And may we live in great equanimity, free from burdening attachment to loved ones and contempt for others, but rather with compassion for all. And I say to you all, shalom and namaste, and good luck finding and becoming your miniature Aleph.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Adam Kligfeld. And friends, we seal this beautiful practice today by offering an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning or observing yahrzeit, or if you're accustomed to join in the mourner's Kaddish, to do so. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, we ask you to please stay present for those who are. Offer your compassionate support for those who are grieving. And you can put the name or the names of those you are honoring today by reciting Kaddish in the chat, either now or after we recite Kaddish. Thanks to Harry for sharing the words on the screen. If you're reciting the Kaddish, I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Yitgadash, Shemei Rabbah, Alma Divrei
Likutei
Ve'amich
Malchutei, Bechayechonu V'yamechonu Uvachai, Dechol Beit Yisrael, Agala Uzman Kachiv V'imhu Amen. Shmei Rabbah Rabrach Leolam Olmaye Almaya, Yitbarach Yitztabach V'Pa'av Romam Litnaseh, V'Halal V'Halal Beruchu
Ela min kol
Mikol
birchata
Berchata
v'shirata,
V'Shirata,
ushbechata
V'Chata
v'nechamata,
V'Nechamata,
yamiran
Yamiram
ba'alma,
Be'alma V'Imhu Amen.
Shlama Rabba ben
Shlama Rabba ben
Shemaya,
Shemaya,
Chaim
Chaim
Aleinu
Aleinu Ve'akol
Yisrael,
Israel
Amen.
V'Imhu Amen.
Oseh shalom
Oseh Shalom
b'mamav,
B'Moav,
Yaseh shalom
Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'akol
Israel.
Israel,
El kol
Ve'akol
Roshei
Ha'olatam
Kingdom,
V'Imhu
Amen. And friends, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to our teacher for today, Rabbi Adam Kligfeld. If you're leaving us now, we hope you'll join us to sit into Shabbat together will be led tomorrow by Yael Shai. Very much looking forward to sitting into Shabbat with Yael at our usual time. Thanks to Harry Gobo for holding our space. And again, to Rabbi Adam Kligfeld of Temple Beth Am in Los Angeles for leading us today. And you're welcome, as always, to stay on for conversation with our teacher about today's practice, questions, or just sharing reflections on your practice. Or, of course, if you'd like to just continue to sit with us, welcome to use this time in the container of our group to do so. You could just turn the sound off on your computer or device, and please sit with us. All right, Adam, let me bring you in here. Thanks so much. I wanted to, I'm going to screen share for a second just so that, oops, you want to screen share. Oh, I'll get it later. I wanted to, for those who haven't, who are not familiar, just show the, oops, not that, that's your shell, which is a beautiful shell, but not what I wanted to share. For people who are not familiar with the reduced aleph of the first word of the book of Vayikra, I want to show that. So I'll see if I can call that up. Adam, I want to invite you to talk a little bit about the flip side of this midah of anavav, humility, that reduced aleph represents. And, I really appreciated. I'd never really heard that teaching actually about why isn't it a mitzvah? Because then you'd have pride in it. It raises this question about false humility, fake humility, or the humble brag of, and I will resist the joke, which probably many of you know about humility. Look who thinks they're nothing. Which is to say that it's not easy to tell when we're actually being humble. We can say the words, "Oh, I'm so humbled by," or this is humbling, but there's a certain pride involved in it, even if it isn't a mitzvah. So that's, for those who are inclined to inflate their sense, that's an issue. But the flip side of that coin, of course, is people for whom it's hard to take up space, right? Their aleph is really small. I wanted to invite you to talk a little bit about that for people who might feel like, my issue is really not guarding against inflating myself. My challenge of my humility is actually finding my space, especially if for whatever reason relating to my identity, the world does not afford me space that it affords other people naturally. I want to maybe speak to that a little bit as a practice.
Thanks, Mark. That's one of the hardest things human beings are challenged to do, even amongst those who recognize that it's important to take on the challenge, right? And we'll probably all live and die without ever getting to an A+ in this regard, right? And I think that the sanctity is in the attempt, in the challenge of it. In this particular meditation, I did find myself thinking about moments in the workday coming up where I might be inclined to put out a bigger aleph than is necessary. And how do I turn myself, even in my position at leading the institution, into an appropriate miniature? But there are also many other moments, as you mentioned, where because we're complex, because situations are different and they impact us in different ways, where the same exact person an hour later can feel the exact opposite. Why do I feel so small in this moment? Where's my voice? I know I have something to contribute, but why can't I get it out? Right. And so I think that it's really a toggling factor. And I think our tradition invites us into that in the early parts of the davening, before even regular shul goers come to shul. There's a wonderful juncture where first we say, Ma chayenu, ma tzidkenu, ma yeshuatenu, what is all our righteousness worth? And there's no
Even more
difference.
than that, it's like ma'anu, what are we, right?
There's no difference between us and animals. It's like pressing us down into the most miniature aleph possible. And then the next line is aval anachnu amcha bnei britecha. But we should remind ourselves that we are your people, the people of your covenant. We're worth something. We can do something in this world. And so before we even begin to daven, I hear the liturgy saying, which one of these is nudging you more now, right? If you're too identified with puffing up that we are Amcha Bnei Britecha, maybe you need a little bit of Ma'anu, what are we actually? And if you're starting this day, because it's in the morning prayers, too identified with feeling like you have nothing to offer, remind yourself you're part of a glorious tradition of thousands of years and the world needs something from you. So I think it's not static. Um, I think both can be overdone, right? And by the way, the rabbi who's the author of this teaching, Rabbi Meir Yechiel of Ostroviec, or he's sometimes referred to as the Ostrovsker Rebbe. Sometimes it's hard to say the names of rebbes from towns in Poland. He was a well-known ascetic, so much so for the last 30 or 40 years of his life, he did not eat at all during the day. It was like not a 40-day Ramadan. It was a 40-year Hasidic Ramadan, and only ate a little bit at night, and he wasted away. He died much earlier than he probably should have because his organs stopped working because he wasn't feeding himself enough. So he's teaching about turning yourself into a miniature olive, and he turned himself into too miniature of an olive. That could be overdone as well.
Right. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Here, I'm just going to share for a second. I've got the graphic here so people can see what we're talking about. Here's the first word of the book of Vayikra, and you can see the reduced olive. It's the only example of this in the whole Sacred Torah, and it's pretty small. That's an incredible story that you just told. So I have a bunch of questions, and I'm seeing some questions in the chat too. One question I want to reflect on has to do with applying this whole question of anava in meditation practice. One of the things where my attention went was really in the expansion and contraction of my lungs and belly. And I was conscious of, is it like, trying to allow the breath to be natural and not forced, not to like suck in the air to expand, but not also to deflate too much, not to expel too much, just to sort of notice a natural space that's created by breathing. So I wanted to say if you like any suggestions you might have for that's in the breath, or whether in the breath or some other anchor that we choose to how do we practice being the olive in meditation practice.
There's a practice of breathing and mindfulness that I learned from one of my teachers that suggests that every exhalation should be a little bit longer than the inhalation, so that even your breathing is an act of generosity to the world. Not so that you hyperventilate, but that you try to intentionally take in just the amount of oxygen that you need and expel just a little more than that, so that you are breathing in a humble way vis-a-vis the resources of the world, because we spend too many hours of most days wasting and abusing the resources of the world and claiming too much for ourselves. Maybe even the act of neshama, neshima, right? The breathing that animates our souls can be a way of saying, I know I have a place in this world, and I know it's only actually this big, and I shouldn't take up any more air, right? Sometimes I'm amazed, and I'm sure I'm guilty of this myself as well, when I'm in a group setting, in a meeting, or even a social setting, and I count the number of people in that setting, and I say to myself, on average, if there are 7 people in this setting, each person should be speaking about 1/7 of the time. And I'm amazed by the people who speak 5/7 of the time, and I wonder how they process that. Is that maybe they're struggling because they don't feel like they have enough voice in the world, so this is their way of actually counteracting an over diminution of self, or is it a lack of self-awareness? I try to be aware of that. I try to be aware. I'm not perfect at it at all, but I try to be aware of how much space and breath and time I'm taking in a professional or personal setting, so that I'm taking just the right amount, and that the olive is constantly going from big to small to big to small to big to small.
Thanks for that. So I just think this raising the question, I think, first of all, that raising the awareness in ourselves of, am I inclined to, deflate myself for excessive deflation, or do I feel invisible? Do I feel seen? Do I feel worthy of being seen? Relative to, and then this question of how do I feel relative to others in different situations? It's a really challenging question, and I think particularly for people of marginalized identities, compounded by the context, seeing them as less than in some way. And I'll include Jewish identity as part of that, by the way, in terms of the impact of ancestral trauma and internalizing internalized anti-Semitism, really, the sort of sense of being less than because of our identity. Of course, many of us like compensate for that, but through pride or through excessive pride, maybe, or through xenophobia or et cetera. But it's a live question about our, how our self is constructed. So all of this has to do with, I think, what you're talking about, like in very concrete terms, how much space do I take? How much do I talk? How much do I speak, et cetera? But I think there's another dimension I want to bring in, invite you to talk about too, which is in a sense, and this is maybe where we learned this from Moshe, which is that this comparative framework of more than, less than, which is illustrated by Alan Marinus, the contemporary Musar teacher, and his phrase, no more than my space, no less than my place, is that our tradition basically says everyone is of infinite worth, and you cannot compare infinite to infinite. There's no compare there. That's a different framework for thinking about it. Not whether there is equality in that, but there's no, that anava is really about stepping out of that place of more than, less than, is this enough, is that enough, and then saying, whoa, wait a minute. I am of infinite worth. I'm created in the image of the divine. And so like you pointed to that liturgy in the early part of the morning service, ma anu, ma chayenu, what are we, what are our lives? And it makes me think about Moses's question to God at the burning bush is, like, mi anochi, who am I? Which you can intone in many different ways. Who am I? Or who am I? Right. And anochi also, by the way, right, is how God introduces God's self in the Ten Commandments, in the Aseret HaDibrot. Who is I? And what is I? And what is the self? And this self that I construct, my persona, right, is I'm going to lead to a question here in a second. My persona is this construct that I'm creating in my mind right now. But that's just the surface. Under that persona is a mystery that is not contained by the persona, by all the characteristics or how we look or what we do, something infinitely deeper than that. And I think that anava, in a sense, is remembering that, kind of stepping out of this framework of more than, less than, enough, and seeing it in a different dimension, maybe both at the same time, because that's an important question about how we operate. But bearing in mind, that's what I think makes anava a spiritual quality as well as an ethical quality, right? So I don't know if you want to respond to that in some way, or
Sure, Mark.
how that lands with you.
That was a lot, and that was very rich. So I'm processing it while I'm thinking about the response. By coincidence, I was talking about a portion of that with my 12-year-old son on the walk to school yesterday. We were talking about the self, and we're talking about the 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 the, the part that's so hard to disentangle in our minds as to who's directing our dreams and who's directing our thinking if we're not thinking consciously. Like sometimes we tell ourselves to have a thought.
How old's your son?
12.
12. All right. Deep.
And so when we're dreaming, we're not unconscious and we're alive. And so whatever we think of as our conscious self, the one who's directing our thoughts, is not accessible, but there's still stuff going on there, right? So you're right that our conscious construct of the self is real to us, but it's only a tiny portion of what the mind is, right? And if you read any of Sam Harris's material about the theory of mind, right? We know we know a lot about the brain. We know an infinitesimal amount about what the mind is and the mind's relationship to the brain. And in terms of connecting that to humility, I love what you said about comparisons. Are we more or less humble than this person, and do we have more or less worth than this person? I think there's another paradox here, right? Because each person is of infinite worth, I believe that the tradition is inviting us not to think of ourselves as having immense worth so that we have an outsized ego, but to recognize that we and everyone else is of immense worth, and therefore we don't have to do any comparisons, and we can actually into our humble way of being, right? If Same way that, right, we describe God's uniqueness and God's infiniteness as being so vast, so beyond, not so that we can feel that God lords over us, but that we can feel, pun intended, but that we can feel that God within us, a part of us,
Mm-hmm.
and in a way that is no different or better than God could possibly be a part of any other person who's striving for that. So I think there are some, and I think many people that we experience in life who are boastful may be protecting themselves against a certain self-abnegation, right?
Right.
And it may be that you can get to enough of a sense of how grand you are in the world that you can actually walk humbly, as the prophet Micha is inviting us to.
Yeah.
But it's dangerous because up there you can also be Icarus and have a fall from your prideful high before you got to the place of pride that allows you to be humble. And it's really challenging stuff.
Indeed, it is. Lori, as always, asks a great question, which Lori, I was trying to point to earlier. Maybe it was like too vague, but Lori's asking. We're not going to have time. We have 1 minute left, but I do want to. I think just stating the question is important. Without getting too political, I'm wondering about the historical societal pressure on women to make themselves smaller physically, energetically, intellectually, so as not to threaten men, or even worse, to avoid punishment or ostracism. In the face of Esther's audacity, um, her decision to take up her space and, speak up. How might we balance Anava and creating a new normal for female right sizing ourselves, females right sizing ourselves without the fear of being too much? So beautifully said. Adam, you want to just very quickly comment on that or no? It's kind of said, it's kind of answers itself,
Right.
but go ahead.
Last thing I would try to do as a man is try to answer that question.
Right.
Women should write.
I think you can explain,
I
right?
want to honor that question for what it's asking for. And above Rabbi Mark, someone asked if you could show again the small aleph. I don't know if that's possible. Someone had missed it, wanted to see it.
Yeah, here. Also, you can,
Kuhn, you can.
where is it? Here we go. Here. You can also see it if you go to Shul this Shabbat morning and you want to walk up to the Bima and ask to see the small aleph at the end of services. I bet anybody can do that as well. All right, we are at time. Adam, thank you so much as always. Beautiful practice and teaching, and just a pleasure to be with you. Always grateful for this partnership, and wish you an early Shabbat Shalom and a good day out there in LA. And for everyone, hope to see you tomorrow. Very much looking forward to our session with Yael Shai tomorrow to sit in Shabbat together. Thanks to Harry for holding our space and to each of you for being here. And be safe and well, everyone. Many blessings.